Oda has finally revealed that Emu and Joy Boy were actually friends. And even though that alone would have been enough to carry an entire chapter years ago, now we've received far more information. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. The entire chapter focused on the fight between Loki and Emu, and what most people, including me, didn't expect is the fact that Loki could survive against Emu for that long. Not only survive, but by the end of the chapter, Loki even had the upper hand. This feat is insane when we compare it to what we saw at God Valley. 6 of the strongest fighters of that era used a combined attack against Emu, who wasn't even using his real form, and they couldn't even scratch him. But now Loki's having a fair one-on-one fight against this creature. There is an explanation though, because of course Loki isn't stronger than Rox, Roger, and Garp combined. The key lies in his Devil Fruit. Loki's Nidhogg Devil Fruit can not only cancel Emu and Harold's contract, but it can also negate Emu's regeneration. That's why he was able to damage Emu, and that's why this fruit is considered legendary. I mean, there's a reason why this is one of the 2 Devil Fruits that Rox wanted. Rox understood his true power and knew how to counter Emu. Even though things are going well for Loki and the Straw Hats right now, we still know the truth. Emu is not going to lose, especially not against Loki. Luffy hasn't even joined the fight yet, so let's predict what might happen next. Loki will continue to put up a great fight against Emu while Luffy recovers. We'll likely see Loki enter his hybrid form and dominate Emu for a while, but eventually Emu will come out on top. Just as Emu is about to finish Loki off, Luffy will arrive and save him, similar to the Doflamingo and Law scene. Oda did say that Luffy will go crazy in the next volume, so I believe he was referring to Luffy going up against Emu. I don't think Luffy will win, but he will put up a generational fight driven by rage over his fallen crewmates. We might even see a power-up from Luffy, mainly in terms of Haki. Since Oda didn't make Emu as overwhelmingly dominant as we expected, there are 3 possible ways this fight could end. The first option is that Luffy manages to hold Emu off until he becomes weakened and is forced to leave Elbaf. I don't really like this outcome because it would make Emu's arrival feel somewhat pointless. The second option is that Vivi arrives and sacrifices herself to save the Straw Hats. Most of you who have seen my previous videos already know my reasoning, but I want to add one more logical argument. There must be some kind of ritual to restore Emu's body in a natural way, paving the way for the final war in the story. It's hard to imagine the main villain fighting under a strict timeline while coughing blood. Vivi is clearly the key to restoring his body without any consequences or restrictions. Emu called her by name and didn't tear her poster previously, which suggests he sees her more as a necessity than as an enemy. Especially when you consider the scene in the flower room, Emu cut out pictures of Luffy, Teach, and Shirahoshi, declaring them enemies who must be erased, and then followed that by staring at Vivi's intact poster with deep thought. I'm not saying Vivi will die, more likely Emu could preserve her, possibly using her blood, but the fact remains, Emu needs to fight at full power in the end, and Vivi seems to be the only possible way for that to happen. Logically, it feels almost unavoidable. I'm also looking forward to seeing Emu discover the relationship between Vivi and Luffy. Joy Boy and Lily returning spiritually is already making Emu angry, but on top of that, the fact that they are connected and that Vivi and Luffy are friends is sure to carry great significance to him. The third option is that Emu wins in the end and enslaves Loki. Yes, Loki, not Luffy or any other Straw Hat. Emu clearly declared in the previous chapter that he was looking for the one who killed his servant, Harold. Is he more afraid of Nidhogg than Nika? Maybe. After all, the Nidhogg fruit cancels his regeneration and his contracts with the Gorosei and the Holy Knights. Emu might want to erase that power completely. At the very least, we haven't seen Emu be as disturbed by Luffy and the Nika Devil Fruit as he is by Loki's Nidhogg power. Another reason is that I believe if Emu enslaves Loki, Ragnir will remain with the Straw Hats, specifically with Usopp, and there are many reasons for this. Yes, Elbaf is Usopp's arc, and he is meant to become a brave warrior, but let's set that aside for a moment and focus on the details and hints from Oda. A hammer is clearly Usopp's weapon of choice, aside from his slingshot. We've seen him use a hammer in Alabasta and in Thriller Bark, and hammers have become increasingly significant in Elbaf. Who in the crew could befriend or cheer up a small creature like a squirrel? Usopp. Maybe he even gives it a seed. This color spread could be subtle foreshadowing. There's also the interesting mention of Excalibur. Ragnir is essentially the Excalibur of Elbaf. And speaking of small, cute creatures connected to hammers, Usopp is already somewhat familiar with one, Mary's Klabauterman. There's a clear build-up toward Usopp obtaining a hammer, so I wouldn't be surprised if Emu enslaves Loki and Usopp ends up wielding Ragnir, at least temporarily, until Loki is eventually freed. Enslaving Loki is also a smarter move than killing him. If Loki were killed, the Nidhogg Devil Fruit would simply reincarnate, allowing someone else to obtain it. Emu doesn't fear Loki himself, he fears the Devil Fruit. By enslaving Loki, he ensures that no one else can access possess that power for potentially hundreds of years. After all, Loki is a giant. Now let's talk about what might be the most important part of the chapter. The reveal that Joy Boy and Emu were once friends 800 years ago. There's something poetic about the idea that Emu believes true happiness can only exist under domination while remembering Joy Boy, someone who is genuinely happy without it. No matter how much Emu hates Joy Boy, he still keeps his straw hat. Could the frozen straw hat actually mark Joy Boy's resting place? Similar to how Ace and Whitebeard are honored with their personal items at their graves? Like Joy Boy, Luffy doesn't care about power, he only wants freedom. That's exactly why he can never fall under Emu's control. Their silhouettes were also very interesting. I understand why Oda chose to silhouette Joy Boy, but why Emu? For example, in Egghead, we saw Emmet and Joy Boy. Joy Boy was silhouetted, of course, but Emmet wasn't because we already knew what he looked like. But now, even after showing us two different forms of Emu, Oda still chooses to draw him as a silhouette. Interestingly, the silhouette resembles the Verth statue from Skypiea. It makes me think that things are not as simple as they seem when it comes to Emu. He may have had a completely different form during the Void Century, and the version we're seeing now in Elbaf could just be one of his bodies, similar to how Pain uses his abilities in Naruto. Joy Boy's silhouette is also very important. It's clear that he looks a lot like Luffy, maybe with slightly fluffy hair. It even reminds me of Iñaki. I believe we're going to get Joy Boy's full face reveal in the next few chapters, possibly from Emu himself when he meets Luffy. This chapter reminds me of when we saw Rox's silhouette from Loki's memories in chapter 1145, just before his full reveal in chapter 1154. Joy Boy should finally be revealed in Elbaf. I'm sure you all remember the theories that Joy Boy is actually a future version of Luffy who travels back in time, or vice versa, right? This theory has regained popularity after this reveal, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's a very easy and unrefined way to explain their connection, and Oda's a far better writer than that. Joy Boy is not future Luffy. He's a completely different person from the past. If Luffy were actually Joy Boy, Emu would have already recognized his haki by now. Also, Oda has consistently avoided using time travel to the past, likely because it would create massive plot holes and paradoxes. In this chapter, it was essentially confirmed that there are three types of ideologies in the story. Emu represents domination, Luffy and Joy Boy represent freedom within a natural hierarchy, while Blackbeard, and most likely Davy Jones, represent absolute freedom and chaos. Even though I'm sure Lily will be an important figure in the story, I don't believe the Great War happened because of her alone. Joy Boy and Emu most likely fought because of their fundamentally different visions of the world. Vegapunk said something very similar during his message. Without knowing the true spark that caused the war, he couldn't say who was right or wrong. He simply stated that two opposing ideologies clashed, Joy Boy and his allies versus Emu and the 20 Kingdoms. It's even possible that Emu didn't betray Joy Boy and Joy Boy didn't betray Emu. Maybe the only real betrayal came from Lily. Lily might have originally been on Emu's side until after Joy Boy's death. She was one of the founders of the world government. Emu loved her. But she ultimately betrayed him and became the reason the poneglyphs were scattered across the world. That could explain why Emu seems to have conflicted but affectionate feelings toward Lily while still hating Joy Boy. Because in the end, she chose Joy Boy over him. Another interesting idea I want to mention is that Emu might actually be the forest god. There's a line in the Harley that says, "The forest god sent out demons," and the same kanji, ma, is used here. When Emu said, "Common sense and reason will not bind you," it could be because Domi Reversi has the ability to strip away common sense and reason. However, it can also be interpreted in a deeper way, that common sense and reason were never meant to restrain humans in the first place, and that being transformed into demons under Emu's control might actually represent humanity's true nature. If we assume that Emu is the forest god and may have once been on Joy Boy's side, it could make his motivations easier to understand. He may have witnessed firsthand how flawed and irrational humans can be, which led him to believe that controlling and governing them is necessary. That could be why he ultimately decided that true happiness can only exist under domination. But then the question remains, what was so absurd or ridiculous about this story that made Roger laugh? Hopefully, Oda will reveal everything very soon. Of course, another important detail from this chapter is the new parallels between Emu and Mihawk, but I'll be making a separate video about that topic, so do subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that video. I'll just mention that Mihawk is clearly a very important and special character in the story. He is one of the only characters, alongside Dragon, who was introduced at the very beginning, and even after 27 years, we still know very little about them. Even Emu was revealed before them, and we've at least seen Dragon during God Valley and Kuma's flashback, but Mihawk, Oda is clearly saving him for the end. Now let's get back to the chapter. In the end, Loki sent Emu into the Atom Tree, which might not have been the best move. Emu uses black flames, and we know that one of the weaknesses of the Yggdrasil tree is fire. The second weakness is lightning, Loki's own power. It's also been mentioned that if the flames spread throughout the tree, the entire country will be destroyed. So the question is, will we witness the destruction of this legendary tree and Elbaf, or will someone step in to save it? Maybe Nami with her weather abilities? We'll have to wait and see. Before that, we still need to see Emu fight both Loki and Luffy. It's also possible that Luffy is already ready to fight. That could be the reason why Emu was smiling at the end. He may have finally found something exciting after 800 years. Unlike previous chapters, I also want to talk about the cover story because it actually seems very important. This cover brings back the shark pandas that appeared during Hachan's cover story. I think Oda wants us to revisit that story because it might contain hints related to current events. Hachi escapes from the Marines and saves a panda shark. Later, the panda shark gives frozen meat to Hachi, and in the cover of chapter 185, we see a devil fruit inside a freezer. It doesn't feel random, especially since cover stories are canon. Later, we see Hachi giving a piece of meat to a starving man on an island. This mysterious man rewards Hachi with a ring. Turns out that the ring once belonged to the Goldfish Princess. As a result, Hachi receives another reward, a golden trident, which looks very similar to the weapons used by Enel and Emu. Hachi's journey doesn't end there, but this trident is what really caught my attention, especially because it appears in the same chapter where the Climotact was introduced for the first time. At that point, Enel hadn't even been mentioned yet. The fact that Oda chose to bring back the same panda shark from Hachi's story is really interesting. We also see the word Queen written on Carrot's coat. Could these elements represent Lily and Davy Jones? Lily as the Queen and Davy Jones, since the panda shark had a devil fruit stored underwater, which could parallel Davy Jones's locker at the bottom of the sea. Additionally, Oda may have already foreshadowed Emu and Joy Boy's friendship in the cover story of chapter 1172. On that cover, we see a swan wearing a straw hat and another swan wearing a crown. Joy Boy had a straw hat, and Emu, who resides in Marijois, wears a crown. The swans also appear friendly toward each other, much like Joy Boy and Emu in the current chapter. That's it for today. Write your own opinions about this chapter in the comments, and if you want to see more about Emu, click this video right here. Thanks for watching. Bye.